Hello and welcome to JamHammer. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the first and only Warhammer 40k novel I've ever read, First and Only. This is a book written by Dan Abnett, a sci-fi writer luminary who has had runs with Marvel, DC, 2000 AD, and is responsible for some of the most popular Warhammer 40k series, including Eisenhorn, the Horus Heresy, and, of course, Gaunt's Ghosts. The first of these novels, First and Only, was published in 1999, making it one of the earliest works to come out of the Black Library, Games Workshop's publishing arm. The narrative mainly focuses on the exploits of Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt, a stoic and somewhat controversial figure in the Imperium, being both a political officer as well as a battlefield commander. This combination of roles makes Commissar Gaunt quite unpopular with a number of other high-ranking officers throughout the novel, as does the compassion he feels for his adopted regiment, the Tanith First, which causes him to make some quite unexpected decisions to achieve his objectives and try to spare the lives of his men. These choices, and Gaunt's superlative skill as a tactician, frequently embarrass and enrage other more inept Imperial commanders who plot to be rid of Gaunt for good. We'll start off with a brief synopsis of the book, so beware, a lot of spoilers ahead. First and Only has a master narrative where Gaunt and his Tanith regiment are part of a huge Imperial crusade tasked with retaking several worlds that have fallen to the corrupting influence of chaos. We begin on a Forge world where the Lord General Dravir, who harbours a real enmity towards Gaunt, sends the Tanith in against a heavily defended trench line and enemy artillery screen, with the expectation that they'll be wiped out in the process, allowing the proud regiment of Jantine patricians to win the day. However, Gaunt's strategies and the excellent skills of the Tanith forces, alongside support from the Victorian Dragoons regiment, allow them to break through the lines and eradicate the Chaos forces. The Tanith First are then granted R&R on Imperial world after this, where Gaunt is contacted by an old associate, Farid, who has uncovered a plot by Lord General Dravir to overthrow his superior, the new elected War Master. He also informs Gaunt of a weapon hidden on the next planet that the Tanith will be deployed to, that's going to be instrumental in this plot. The patricians then spring a trap and try to assassinate Gaunt for the slight they suffered on the Forge world. They ultimately fail in this endeavour, and Gaunt survives the ambush. We then follow the Tanith aboard an Imperial Navy vessel as they prepare to deploy again. Whilst aboard, one of the Tanith officers, Major Rawn, is captured and interrogated by an Inquisitor Haldane, who is helping Lord General Dravir to overthrow the War Master. The Tanith manage to save Rawn and fatally wound the Inquisitor in the process. The Tanith deploy, and Farid meets up with Gaunt, leading him and a few Tanith men to an underground bunker containing the secret weapon. Dravir hears of this, denounces the Tanith as traitors, and dispatches the Jantine patricians again to wipe them out. A bloody battle ensues, where a small rearguard force of Tanith troops sell their lives dearly to stall the Jantine advance. Underground, the secret weapon turns out to be a relic of the past that can mass-produce autonomous robotic soldiers dubbed Men of Iron. Gaunt orders this dangerous tool to be destroyed, much to the chagrin of Farid, who then tries to kill Gaunt, but is slain in turn by Major Rawn. It is revealed that Farid was actually brainwashed and under the thrall of the Inquisitor Haldane, who was controlling him from afar via psychic machinations. The shock of Farid's death causes some Perils of the Warp-esque feedback against the Inquisitor, who explodes, taking the Imperial vessel, Lord General Dravir, and the record of his orders down with him. Gaunt and his surviving Tanith are then confronted by some of the Jantine patricians who broke through. Their commander, Colonel Flens, challenges Gaunt to a duel, but is ultimately bested. The remaining Jantine are then overcome by their old allies, the Victorian Dragoons, who come to assist Gaunt and the Tanith. The narrative is not completely linear though. It jumps temporally between this present-day military campaign and several flashbacks to Gaunt's experiences as a young student officer, as well as glimpses of Tanith and the founding of the First. It's revealed through these segments that that Gaunt was orphaned after his father was killed in action. However, a rogue psychic prisoner reveals to him that his father was left to die by his commanding officer, General Dircius of the Jantine Patricians. Gaunt uses his commissar status to hunt down and kill Dircius for such cowardice, evoking the ire of the Jantine in turn. This psyker also warns Gaunt of the Men of Iron, and that using them would lead to nothing but disaster. Psykers then play a pivotal role in the unfolding narrative of First and Only. Besides the one giving Gaunt insights, there is a hurried snippet at the beginning of the novel where an astropath relays the cyclically transferred data concerning the Men of Iron relic, as well as its location before the vessel they are on is demolished by Chaos ships. Despite the beneficial role these psykers play in guiding Gaunt to destroy a potentially devastating weapon, psychic powers are demonized throughout. In this opening section of the novel, the pilot remarks that he hated the witchcraft of the psykers, despite them being integral to navigating ships such as his safely through the warp, both aboard and back on Terra. As the novel progresses, often when confronted with psychic energies, the soldiers will make warding gestures or mutter prayers to the Emperor to stave off the taint of corruption. The leader of the Jantine Patricians, Colonel Flentz, for example, is unable to hide his dislike for psykers when confronted by Inquisitor Haldane. "I have no prejudices, Inquisitor." "Yes, you have. I can taste them. You detest mind-seers. Shall I show you what you are missing?" Impossible light flooded into Flentz's skull. For 1 second, he saw eternity. He saw the angles of space, the way they intersected with time. He screamed. He vomited. Haldane ultimately controls the mind of several Imperial troopers and uses them as puppets to try to stop Gaunt from reaching the Men of Iron relic, eventually using them as would-be assassins. The very psychic power that he wields, though, like so many double ones and sixes, results in his own explosive demise. Although Gaunt is often the main focal point for the narrative, being the eponymous protagonist, we do get a lot of alternative perspectives like these too. At another point, we are offered some exposition of the Tanith Regiment from Trooper Kathran, a member of the First who is pinned down in a shell hole with a Vitrian Dragoon. We learn here that the Tanith First are called the First and Only, as they were formed from the survivors of 3 regiments raised just prior to their homeworld being destroyed by Chaos forces. Kathran describes anger and the sense of absence. He realised with a twinge that this was the first time since the loss that he had recounted the story aloud. The capitalisation of loss here connotes this as, understandably, a profoundly significant event, one which lives on in their memories and is the defining moment of their collective characteristic. That's what makes us ghosts, you see. The last few unquiet souls of a dead world. They are also colloquially known as Gaunt's Ghosts due to their commander and their particular prowess in stealth and infiltration, owed partly to their signature camouflage cloaks and the skills honed on their moving forest homeworld. We get some insight of their world from Kathran too. He describes how the trees, a kind we called gnarlwood, well, moved, replanted, repositioned themselves following the sun. The rains, whatever tides and urges ran in their sap. He goes on to explain that this meant there was no frame of reference on their homeworld, causing the Tanith to develop a preternatural instinct for direction. Although the surviving Tanith of the First are few in number, only about 2,000 of us left, these abilities make them particularly adept soldiers on the battlefield, able to scout ahead of the main Imperial forces and make use of their environment to avoid being spotted or targeted by enemy ordnance. And their loss, manifested as unquenchable rage, makes them particularly dogged and brutal combatants, with their animosity for the forces of chaos culminating in them as the perfect soldiers for this Imperial crusade. Kathran, as an exemplar of the rank-and-file Tanith Guardsman, seems to loathe this role though. When the Vitrian mentions the reputation of the First, Kathran is jaded, saying that, yes, the sort of reputation that gets us picked for all the stealth and dirty commando work going. I often wonder who'll be left to do the dirty jobs when they use the last of us up. Judging by the way the First are mistreated and sacrificed by Imperial command throughout the novel, this seems apt. At the beginning of the battle to reclaim the Forge World, Lord General Dravir decrees that they will use these ghosts as a buffer and slice a hole into the heart of the main defences. The Tanith forces are typically sent in as a vanguard with little support from their fellow regiments and must trust to themselves, their officers, and to Gaunt, their leader, to see them through against staggering odds. This is met with contemptuous satisfaction by some of the regiments too, particularly those from a more prestigious lineage in the Imperial forces like the Jantine patricians. Colonel Flens basks in the idea that Gaunt and his low-born scum would be used, expended, sacrificed on the enemy guns to effect his own glory. He considers his regiment to be superior to the Tanith First due to their lack of pedigree, in spite of, or perhaps because of, the Tanith's numerous victories and their aforementioned reputation as a successful fighting unit. Throughout the book, we see further examples of how the Tanith operate differently from a typical Imperial force. Back in the crater, Cathran and the Vitrian Dragoon compare their opposing views and approaches to war. "We Tanith, we got nothing like that. No grand art of war." The Vitrian looked round at him. "Do you have no code? No philosophy of combat?" "We do what we do," Cathran began. "We live by the principle, fight hard if you have to fight, and don't let them see you coming. That's not much, I suppose." The Vitrians have their own codex, which mandates how they should fight, the tactics they should use, and even, it is later revealed, influences what power level their lasguns are set to. This inflexible creed poses a problem though, as these more fastidious troopers then cannot adapt to overcome an enemy with a more logical approach. There is some foreshadowing to this effect. While the Tanith First set their weapons to half power, Gaunt says to the Vitrian Colonel Zoran, "I see you've instructed your men to set charge at maximum," Gaunt said as an afterthought. "It is written in the Vitrian art of war, make your first blow sure enough to kill and there will be no need for a second." When the ghosts and their Vitrian allies break through the lines and reach the Chaos forces, called the Shriven, a huge firefight ensues. Inevitably, the Imperial troopers begin to lose fire superiority. Gaunt then raises a call with the Vitrian Colonel. "Instruct your men to alter their settings to half power." "Why, Commissar?" "Because they're exhausting their ammo. I admire your effort, Colonel, but it doesn't take a full power shot to kill one of the Shriven." Zoran appreciates this observation and sends the command. Gaunt makes the rational call and overrules the Vitrian dogma as it was unfit for application in this particular context, perhaps because it does not assume a small platoon of soldiers stranded behind enemy lines without sufficient supplies. Gaunt has his own way of explaining this decision though. "It'll last longer, and you'll send more to glory. No need for overkill," he said with a smile. This is some interesting phraseology, and it suggests the overriding sense of duty and honour to die as a guardsman in the service of the God Emperor. Later on, while aboard an Imperial spaceship en route to the next war zone, a doctor from Tanith says to Gaunt that, "I think you'll do all in your power to see us right, to take us to glory, to take us to peace." More than looking for any chance to have this battalion lay down their lives in glorious service, the Doctor sees that Gaunt also cares about the lives of the Tanith soldiers. In the Doctor's eyes, and many other characters throughout the novel, this makes Gaunt different from a typical Imperial commander. The Doctor says, "I think you care, Gaunt. Care about your ghosts." Clearly this is true. Gaunt tries throughout the novel to limit the unnecessary losses of his already slim battalion. This does not mean, however, that he never sends his men to their deaths. When he realises his soldiers have more firepower than their Vitrian comrades, he gets his men to lead the charge on the Shriven. He also has few qualms about leaving a rearguard force to lay down their lives to slow the Jantine patricians long enough for him to destroy the Men of Iron. He does take the ghosts to glory, but it is a route paved by war, not peace. Gaunt is a frontline commander though. Unlike the antagonistic Lord General Drevere and Colonel Flens, he is in the trenches with the soldiers, and does not ask them to do anything that he would not do. He's always there leading from the front with a bolt pistol and chainsword revving at the ready. "Are you with me, boys?" he asks with a wolfish grin, before bursting from cover firing at the Shriven lines. This is but one of countless passages from this novel where Gaunt is in the thick of it with the troopers. And this is where Abnett is paying homage to Bernard Cornell's series Sharp. A similar tale of a soldier given command of a regiment and leading from the field rather than the officer's tent behind the lines. We get another nod to this early in the novel where Drevere asks Flentz what he thinks of Gaunt. Flentz responds, "He's a commissar, a political officer, but by a turn of fate he's achieved a regimental command. War Master Slado granted him the command of the Tanith on his deathbed." This mirrors how Sharp gained his battlefield commission, causing him to be disliked, initially, by his troops for being a soldier who thinks he can tell them what to do as a lieutenant. And he's despised in kind by the officers for being a low-born commoner with pretensions of grandeur.
The King in the North!
For Gaunt, he's disliked by the brass for being a commissar and commander who breaks with conventional Imperium strategies, and similarly garners some animosity from the Tanith for being, as the Doctor calls him, Chulin, outsider, unknown. This is most vehemently demonstrated by Major Rawn, a Tanith officer who is quite renowned for his dislike of Gaunt. From the start, back at the bloody hour of the founding itself, he'd shown no loyalty to the Commissar. It had astonished him when Gaunt had raised him to Major and given him tertiary command of the regiment. Gaunt knows that there are Tanith men loyal to Rawn, despite him being the official commander of the regiment, so he decides to keep Rawn close. He also knows that Rawn, despite his disloyalty, is a capable soldier and a worthy battlefield commander. This unsteady alliance actually proves to be beneficial too, with Rawn ultimately saving Gaunt's life by shooting the brainwashed Farid who tries to kill him. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking it, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the bell to be notified of new videos being released. Overall, First and Only is a great novel. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and can't wait to read more in the series as well as explore some more of Dan Abnett's writing in the other 40k series. The action never lets up for a second, and although it's hilariously gratuitous and overly sensationalised at times, it's a perfectly apt tone for a book about give 'em hell heroics from a ragtag group of soldiers. The moments of insight we get to the wider life in the Imperium are very interesting too, as so much of the lore in 40k is, justifiably with its tagline, concerned with war. The overlapping narratives of conflict with enemies found both within and without blend almost seamlessly into a really compelling story, with a few twists and turns thrown in there that you really don't see coming. There'll be more Black Library videos being released in the future, so please do keep an eye out for more content coming soon to JamHammer. In the meantime, there are plenty of other videos available on the channel, including a few that are on screen now for you to click on. Thanks again for watching.